Good afternoon, everybody. Let me just check this, make sure people aren't still trickling in here. Corey, are we good to go?
Yeah, there are a few more people people kind of come in gradually. Okay. So give it like 20 seconds or so, then you can get started. All right, you should be good to go, Jonathan.
Cool. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us in the third and last of our webinars for ATP Cycle 6. My name is Jonathan Matz. I'm California Senior Policy Manager for the Safe Routes Partnership. As is customary for our webinar series every ATP cycle, we reserve the last one for just an overview of all the changes, big and small, in guidelines, applications, and implementation that applicants should be aware of, so you're not caught off guard by anything you don't recognize in the closing stages of your ATP application. ATP applications are due a little bit less than 2 months from now on June 15th. And so we hope that the webinars that we've been providing and the resources have been helpful to you as either repeat or new applicants to the program. Really hoping that we get some great applications this ATP cycle, and that we're able to program a fair share of them. A little bit about us. I have a feeling I can't see your names right now, but I have a feeling I know many of you on the webinar right now. We at the Safe Routes Partnership are a national organization focusing on advancing safe walking and biking to schools, parks, other key community destinations, and in so doing, improving the health and well-being of kids of all races, income levels, and ability, which we see as really the foundation of creating healthy communities for everyone. As I mentioned before, this is the third and last of our ATP Cycle 6 webinar series. We started these webinars in ATP Cycle 5. Really our goal is pretty straightforward, but helping provide information about best practices and in this case, any changes to the program itself for both new and repeat applicants, particularly those under-resourced and maybe who have not previously been successful in the program. To that end, we offer targeted technical assistance to 5 communities every cycle. So about a year from now, stay tuned for our RFPs for Cycle 7. We also do this webinar series, and we've written a guide, which we first published to the ATP in 2018, and last month published an update that reflects some changes in the program since then. The link to that is, you see it on your screen, and you'll also have these slides available after this webinar series as well. We'll be seeing a few different links as we go through, so worry not. They'll all be available to you after we're done here. A little bit about ATP Cycle 6 in broad strokes and what our goals are. I mentioned this one just earlier, and also wanted to give a heads up. We have a couple of presenters from the California Transportation Commission working very, very hard on Cycle 6. Many of you, I think, know them. Beverly Newman Burkhard, Assistant Deputy Director at the CTC, and Alika Chingizi, Program Analyst. They'll be going through changes both across the board from applications as well as for each different project type. Funding in Cycle 6 is thankfully a little bit larger than it has been in recent cycles, by about 200 million or so. So we currently, as of the adopted program in March, we have a little over $650 million available in cycle 6. So for those of you familiar with the breakdown and how that's funded, half of that's going to go to the statewide component, and the rest through metropolitan planning organizations and the small and urban rural component. As you may be aware, there are proposals for an augmentation, one-time augmentation to the ATP through the budget surplus. We are hopeful that this time the original $500 million request, which we first saw in the fall, is going to go through. And we know as well that there's interest in going considerably beyond that. We have partnered with CTC in asking for in asking for a total $2 billion augmentation, and would be hopeful that some of those funds could be shared between cycle 5 and cycle 6 as well. So please let your legislators know the importance of doing that. I am now going to hand it over to Beverly and Alika as well to start talking about changes consistent across the applications as well, and then by project type.
Thank you, Jonathan. Just waiting for slides. Great, thanks so much. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Alika Changizi. As Jonathan mentioned, I am a program analyst with the Commission's Active Transportation Program. And also on this webinar is my colleague, Beverly Newman-Burkhardt. And if you could go to the next slide, please. So I'll be going over a few of the changes that we made to the Cycle 6 Active Transportation Program, and then I'll hand things off to Beverly. So I'll start off with the project size thresholds. So during the 2023 ATP workshops, we received requests from our stakeholders asking to update the change in the project size thresholds for the applications due to the increased project costs. And so Commission staff proposed new thresholds and received a lot of support from our stakeholders. And before I dive into each of the thresholds, I did want to point out that these are based on the total project cost and not the Active Transportation Program request. So the new thresholds are for the small infrastructure, that's 3.5 million or less in total project cost. For medium infrastructure, that is over 3.5 million and up to 10 million in total project cost. And the large infrastructure application is over 10 million total project cost. So this has an impact on the type of infrastructure application that applicants would fill out. Of course, that would be based on the project's total project cost. This also could affect applicants that are applying for pre-construction, only funds, since the large applications are the only application where you can request pre-construction only funding. And if you go to the next slide, I will hand things over to Beverly.
Thanks, Alika. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to go through the main guidelines changes that we had this year. And so this first slide is the changes across all applications. So these are changes that we implemented across all application types, well, for the most part. Yeah, and then I'll go into more detail on the different application types where there were other changes. So in Part A of all applications now, applicants are asked if their project is located near a roadway or a freeway that has an annual average daily traffic of over 125,000. And if so, the applicant has to describe any measures they've taken to mitigate air pollution exposure to users, and if any, And then they can also discuss like why that project area was chosen. So, you know, if maybe that's the path that everyone's using and that's why it was chosen. So, so this is in part A of the application, and part A of the application is not scored by the evaluators. It's an informational section. So it's where you're giving your project scope and you're talking about that you're kind of listing the different elements that will be in your project. So just to really be clear, this is not a scored question. This was a request by a commissioner, and a commissioner who wants to learn more about what agencies are doing to mitigate air pollution exposure, requested this. So really, this is just kind of an information gathering question. And basically, we'll be taking this information and analyzing it after applications are submitted, and then kind of giving it to our commissioner and going from there, just kind of seeing what's out there and what people are doing to mitigate air pollution or air pollution exposure for users. So another change that was made throughout all application types was more prompts about older adults and persons with disabilities. So this was really a gap that we saw in the program. Like there wasn't really any mention within the guidelines or within the application or scoring rubrics of the needs of older adults. And so we worked with the Department of Aging to integrate some language into the guidelines and applications and scoring rubrics to put more emphasis on these users and to kind of just prompt applicants to talk about them a little bit more and maybe more some special needs that they may have. This was kind of integrated into almost every question. So talking about the needs of older adults and persons with disabilities, and then kind of talking about any special safety concerns. And then we also added a new project designation type. It's a Safe Routes for Seniors project. And so these are projects that focus on creating facilities that help improve the quality of life for older adults. So in our scoring rubrics and in the application, we also added language on COVID because we know that our public participation is going to look a little bit different this cycle than it has before. And we know that a lot of agencies were really limited on like their in-person workshops that they could do. So we just added some more examples of what public participation might look like during COVID, you know, things like virtual workshops and also things like more crowdsourced maps and surveys. And we also created space in the application for applicants to talk about any specific challenges they faced due to COVID and how they kind of dealt with them when they were doing their public participation. So we also added more non-infrastructure prompts into the infrastructure applications for combination projects. So if you are submitting a combination project, so an infrastructure plus non-infrastructure project, there's going to be more space for you to talk about your non-infrastructure element now. This was actually based on feedback that we heard from both our applicants and our evaluators. One thing we noticed last cycle was that we had a lot of combination applications, but there seemed to be also a lot of applicants who, you know, created this really great non-infrastructure program as part of a combination project, but then never actually mentioned it again, like during the application, like in their narrative. So I think we added prompts to almost every question about the non-infrastructure component. So, you know, making sure that applicants are addressing it in terms of need and also in terms of safety. Excuse me. And then in terms of, you know, even in the large infrastructure application, how it helps the project be transformative. So really, again, this is something that we're hoping will help applicants really highlight these non-infrastructure programs. And then finally, in alignment with these changes listed here and some of the changes I'm going to mention in a minute, we also increased the word counts of several questions, knowing that we are asking for a bit more information this cycle. So we wanted to make sure there was space for you all to to write about your great projects. Okay, so those are the changes across all applications. So there really weren't that many changes. I mean, there's those changes, and then there's some in the large application and some in the medium application, but there really weren't that many changes this cycle overall. So our goal this cycle was really to keep changes to a minimum in the application, just because we know there's going to be a lot of applicants resubmitting their projects from last cycle, and we wanted to make it as easy as possible for you to kind of take the feedback you got from the evaluators last cycle and then touch up those areas where you needed work and then resubmit. So even those changes that I just mentioned are all very minor, and then even the ones I'm going to go through are minor for the most part. So in the large application, the most changes occurred in the public participation and planning question. There's a new question about whether your project is included in an approved active transportation or similar plan. So this is worth 1 point in the large application, large project application. And so basically, if your project is listed in an approved active transportation plan, you get a point, or a similar plan. So we don't actually define what a similar plan is, and we give space for you to describe, like, basically to justify like why your maybe you have a vision zero plan or a safe routes to school plan, you know, and it's listed in one of those. So you can kind of, whatever type of plan you have that you think is a similar plan, you can justify it in some space and get a point there. And we're also saying that if your plan hasn't been approved yet, but will be approved within a reasonable time frame, you could also earn that point. And we also don't define what a reasonable time frame is as well. We really wanted to keep it flexible, so it's really up to you to kind of describe when it will be approved and, you know, why it's a priority. So in the context sensitivity and innovation question, we also added more emphasis to projects that are creating or building on low stress networks. So this was actually already part of this question. We asked, you know, applicants if their project was creating or building on a low stress network. And we just add a little bit more emphasis and a few more prompts related to low stress networks in this question. And we really just want to make sure our applicants are thinking about this. So, you know, how does this project basically fit into your overall vision for a low stress walking and biking environment in your community? And we know that, you know, some projects may be the first project ever in a community. So, you know, you can even talk about it in that context, like this is the first project that we're building, but, you know, this fits into our overall vision and, like, you know, this is what we have planned for the future. So, finally, in the transformative projects question, we expanded on housing. So last cycle, we worked with the Department of Housing and Community Development to integrate some housing language into this question. So basically, to talk about how the project is supportive of housing, especially low income or affordable housing. And this cycle, we worked with them again, and we're encouraging our applicants to look at the Department of Housing and Community Development's pro-housing designation program. So basically, we're not requiring you to apply for the pro-housing designation program, but we're hoping that our applicants will kind of go to the pro-housing, to their pro-housing website, which is linked in the application, and kind of look at their pro-housing framework and to see like which policies fit what you're trying to do in your community and how that really supports your active transportation project. And really, this is just part of our effort to strengthen that link between transportation and active transportation and housing. And also really in recognition of, you know, the housing crisis in California. And then we also in part B of this question, we added some language on local ordinances. So this question had already asked about any local policies that you have that are supportive of active transportation. And so now it says basically to discuss any local policies or local ordinances that are supportive of active transportation. And so these can be things like bike parking requirements, or maybe, you know, when there's a new development, they have to include active transportation elements. All right. And so in the medium application, really the only change besides the ones I mentioned on that first slide is talking more about low stress networks, and it's the exact same as the change in the large application. So just asking applicants to talk more about how their project is creating or expanding on a low stress network, or is, like, you know, the first portion of a vision for a low stress network. And now those are the main changes, except the critical piece that is missing is non-infrastructure, so our non-infrastructure application. And so Jonathan is actually going to go over the changes to the non-infrastructure application.
Hi, thanks again, Beverly. And quickly over non-infrastructure application, and oh, sorry, I'm realizing my video's off. The changes in guidelines, and more specifically the application and guidance, I should say, for the non-infrastructure application. Consistent with what Beverly was saying earlier, not a whole lot's changed. One thing that administratively has changed a little bit is the 22R, which you may be familiar with, past applicants at least, as the spreadsheet that's kind of, I like to think of it as a little bit the equivalent of the engineer's estimate for the non-infrastructure component or the non-infrastructure application. But it's essentially the cost breakdown for your program. That's now changed to the 25R, which is basically an administrative change, is consistent with changes in the overall local assistance program guide. There have been some very, very minor changes on the actual substance of that, and most specifically is this tab that you see highlighted on your screen here. It's a justification tab, and that just essentially allows applicants to justify larger purposes in advance of requesting the 25R review. Also here, a very minor change just on what that box is to clarify the intention of it. I don't remember exactly how it was phrased earlier, but just so that it's more clear to you how to document funding sources that are non-ATP related. Let's see. Oops. Lost control of my cursor for a second. There we go. There is a little bit that's changed, not so much in the phrasing of the application itself, but in the guidance and the expectations, or I guess, or clarified expectations, I suppose I should say, about a question that's been in the non-infrastructure application for, I think now this will be the third cycle that it's been in. It's question 5, part B, and it has to do with the sustainability of your non-infrastructure program. Now, this question's always been in terms of how how you intend to sustain your non-infrastructure program after the funding horizon has expired. But there was not a whole lot of clarity for applicants in previous cycles about how best to answer this and what kinds of solutions they should be proposing. I think it was assumed generally that you had to be specifically pointing to some replacement funding source that you can enact afterwards. And so the wording has been clarified to indicate that that's not the expectation here. but really has to do with using the time that you do have funding, that the ATP is supporting your program financially, to create foundations in which the community or staff can continue implementing the programs even after funding is expired. So that can involve other sources of funding, but just as importantly, and I think more likely for most communities, really investing in volunteer and community capacity to continue the programs after staff has seeded them and gotten them off the ground. So there are more prompts in the question, and I posted the specific language up here. We also hosted a webinar specifically about this. It was our last, it was the second webinar in the series here. The video and the slides for that you'll see at that link right there as well, and the new non-infrastructure guidance and the 25R that I mentioned are available on the slides there. Oops, one back. There has been a very slight, or I shouldn't say actually slight, we consider this pretty meaningful, but there has been as well a change in the non-infrastructure guidance having to do with supporting law enforcement. So law enforcement involvement in your programs is still allowed, although the guidance has been clarified to emphasize that ATP funding should really be used sort of kind of as a last resort for that, and really focus specifically on things that may fall outside sort of normal staff responsibilities for law enforcement, such as potential one-off street closures for demonstration events, elements of that nature there, rather than assuming that just sort of continually funding day-to-day monitoring of the schools. And there was also just a clarification in some of the eligible costs about the limited circumstances in which bikes and helmets could be purchased and then potentially given away. So it's not as a sort of a blanket giveaway to all members of a participating program or school, but potentially as rewards or some kind of incentive program on that. And I also wanted to quickly pop in, since I actually meant to cover this earlier, and my slides got a little bit out of order, so quickly before going back to Alika, some small changes in disadvantaged communities guidelines as well. So the guidelines in terms of what is acceptable to qualify for disadvantaged communities, the metrics involved, the allowable uses for regional definitions, those have all remained in place. Some of the underlying data has changed, however. So Cal EnviroScreen, both Cal EnviroScreen and Healthy Places Index updated their database. Cal EnviroScreen up to 4.0 and Healthy Places Index up to 3.0. Healthy Places Index in particular has adopted quite a few new indicators. So both the underlying score for your community, as well as some of the indicators that you can hone in on for example, your statement of need, have been updated as well. There's some pretty extensive overviews at the links that I published there. And then the last thing, and this will probably remain the case going forward, but free and reduced lunch eligibility is still allowed to qualify for disadvantaged community status, and as usual required for Safe Routes to School applications as well. There was some uncertainty about that given the state's new universal free lunch program, but the data about eligibility is still being compiled per federal mandates. So as long as that remains the case, and there doesn't seem to be any foreseeable change in that, it'll still be available on the Department of Education. A decision was made to use pre-pandemic data for that, just for purposes of not potentially having too skewed a data set for that, but that is still an eligible and that is still a metric that you can use and should be providing in any case for Safe Routes to School projects, even if it's not what you use to qualify for disadvantaged community status overall. So with that, I'll hand it back to Alika to discuss the enhanced Quick Build pilot program application.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. Okay, so I will be going over a few of the changes that we made to the Quick Build project pilot program. So one of the things that we changed was that we wanted to add more emphasis on project flexibility and the public participation process. So in phase 1 of the Quick Build pilot program, we noticed that many of the applications, were not flexible or adjustable and instead seemed like small infrastructure projects. And many of them didn't have comprehensive plans for continuous community engagement. And so we really wanted to add language in the application and the scoring criteria to emphasize the community input process and project flexibility. So the community engagement question already asked who was engaged and how they would continue to be engaged. And so what we added was how will users provide input into design modifications, and how will these suggestions be used to inform these changes? So here it's important to include a process for testing project configurations and integrating community feedback into your overall project. The project flexibility question is new, and it's asking applicants to describe the anticipated scope of the Quick Build project and potential ways in which the project can be adjusted to address community feedback. And this should include design alternatives that show the project scope is flexible and it can be adjusted based on feedback that you've received from your communities. The next bullet is more flexibility in project estimate. And so last cycle, the applicants were required to submit detailed cost estimates and layouts, which didn't align with the flexible nature of Quick Build projects. And so commission staff is giving applicants more flexibility on cost estimates and will require them to submit more than one layout to show the potential adjustments in your project. Next is the new evaluation framework. And so with the phase 1 of the Quick Build pilot program, we scored the applications using the high, medium, low scoring system. And some feedback that we received from the MPOs was that we score the Quick Builds out of 100 points. And so in turn, it would make it easier for the MPOs to potentially include some of those Quick Build projects in their components. And so we did make adjustments. We created a framework that is out of the 100 points, and that is located and can be found in Appendix D of the 2023 ATP guidelines. The next bullet is new reporting requirements. And so again, last cycle, the reporting process didn't detail a way to capture lessons learned or other project outcomes. And so we refined the reporting process to specifically include a completion report. And so the Quick Build projects aren't required to submit in CalSmart. However, the quarterly reports are now going to be required. And funded Quick Build projects will also be required to attach a new layout plan with each quarterly report. I also wanted to highlight a few other changes, minor changes that we made to the Quick Build program. And so for project schedules and delivery, many of the project schedules look like traditional ATP project schedules. And a lot of the projects we noticed hadn't received environmental clearance or categorical exemption at the time of their applications. And so one thing that we are requiring is that the projects must have environmental clearance or categorical exemption at the time of application. And this will only allow applicants to apply for construction funding only. If the project is expected to be delivered, using the design build method, the applicant can use the cost of design in the construction phase. The next thing I want to go over was time extensions. And so staff is recommending here to only consider quick build project time extensions in extraordinary circumstances. And this is mostly because we saw some of the successful applicants request time extensions and delaying projects that were supposed to address immediate safety needs. And so this will allow for the projects to be true quick build projects. And then the final area I wanted to cover was the scope changes. The traditional ATP scope change process doesn't really work well with the quick build program, since the quick build projects are supposed to be changed based on community testing and input and feedback. And so we are recommending providing more flexibility on to the implementing agencies. And the quick build projects are now expected to be flexible and to change based on community testing and feedback, like I mentioned earlier. So again, the successful applicants must submit new project layouts during each reporting period to reflect any of the adjustments or changes that they made based on their community feedback. And with that, if you could go to the next slide, please. This is our contact information along with Lori Waters, our program manager. And with that, I'll hand things over back to Jonathan.
Thank you both. As promised, straightforward and concise. I have my information up here. We're happy to take questions now. I saw a few come in, and I'm sorry, I don't see a name attached to this, so I can't specifically respond to you. First question is defining near large roadways and freeways and at what distance. And Beverly, I'm not sure if you, or Alika, I'm not sure if you have that information off the top of your head. I believe it was 500 feet.
It's within 500 feet of a roadway with 125,000 ADT.
Okay. So, and there was also, I'm not sure if it's from the same person, another comment without a name. I believe this must be in regards to the 25R. The question is, if an item is over the allowable amount, can we include that item up to the allowable amount and state that we will cover the difference in the justification narrative? And I'm not sure if does that question make sense to either of you, or if the person who asked it, if you want to maybe clarify exactly what you mean. I believe for large expenses such as bike lockers or things like that, I assume that's what the question involves. Not sure if the person who asked that question is still here.
Could you repeat the question, Jonathan?
Sure. The question is, if an item is over the allowable amount, and can we include that item up to the allowable amount and state that we will cover the difference in the justification narrative?
So I would say that it's best to address this question to our colleagues at Caltrans / the Active Transportation Resource Center. So Summer Anderson Lopez is probably the best contact for this question. So I will paste her email address into the chat. So any questions, like technical questions about the 25R or like about technical questions about non-infrastructure should be addressed to her. So I will do that momentarily. I just want to make sure I'll paste it in there in a second.
Thank you. And in the meantime, another question has come in. Does an engineering drawing of the project need to be included with a large application, or will a conceptual graphic suffice? And I'm not sure if this, I would imagine this question applies across the board by project, or the answer to this question would apply across the board per project type, but unless I'm misunderstanding something.
So all applications and all of your layouts and maps need to be project study report equivalent. And so Caltrans actually did a great presentation in December that has examples of what a project study report like layouts and everything look like. And so I will, in addition to Summer's email address, I'm going to paste a link to that presentation. The slides are available and there's a recording of the webinar as well. And I apologize, my dog is now crying because she wants out of the room.
Thanks. I don't see any more questions there. So unless one wants to get in quickly, thank you both, Beverly and Alika, for joining us again. As I mentioned before, a recording of this webinar, as well as all of our slides and a transcript of the chat, will be available on the page you used to sign up for this within 24 hours or so, and it'll get emailed out to you as a participant. So, oh, I just saw one more question come in. Is the large infrastructure application significantly longer than a medium application? I'm not sure what your definition of significantly. I would say it's a considerable amount more. The questions are more detailed. The supporting documentation involved is more detailed as well. A lot has to do as well in changes of the actual scoring. So there are some questions, particularly involving scope consistency, that are different in the large application than the medium. Public engagement is more rigorously evaluated and scored as well. The logic being that, you know, for larger, more expensive projects, you need to go above and beyond in terms of demonstrating community demand. It's, you know, that's a broad question, but you know, I would say that it's not an insignificant amount of more writing and just, you know, in general, sort of more scope and public engagement work involved.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, Jonathan. So there's one more question in the large infrastructure application compared to the medium application, but as the application scope and size, they do become a little bit more complex and they ask you for a little bit more information. But something we always tell our applicants is to not really worry about like that, like trying to shoehorn your project into a specific application size. You know, whatever project you're proposing should be the best project to deal with whatever issues you're having, or the best project to meet the needs of the community. And while I would say the small application is probably like easier to fill out because there's not as many questions, there are a lot of advantages to having a large project. Like I feel like you have more space to talk about your project and to really highlight the benefits of your project. So I would just say, don't be intimidated by having to like do an extra question and to have to add a little bit more information, because I mean, you could really, really show how great your project is in that application.
I would agree. And I'd also say, and this is, you know, advice that we give to our technical assistance communities, which is, really identify what project is going to be the most impactful and which is going to address the needs that your community identifies, that the traffic safety data identifies, that is going to demonstrably change the equation in terms of walking and biking for the targeted community. Start from there, and whatever project type that it means you fall into, go ahead and go along with that. Because ultimately the evaluators are going to be able to see, if and I, as an evaluator as well, I've encountered some situations in which I think the decision to try to squeeze everything into a certain project type seems to have been dictating everything about the scope of a project, and sometimes leading applicants to maybe not pursue some changes and some potentially transformative components that really would have made the project a much more compelling one. So again, that's sort of general advice, and the specifics in your community will vary, but overall I think that's probably the best path to take. I do see another question in here. For the Healthy Places Index criteria as a disadvantaged community, does only the composite score count, or would an individual indicator count? It is the composite score that counts for the census tract as disadvantaged. So the individual indicators are, we found them to be extremely useful for things like answering the statement of need in particular, as well as honestly, fine-tuning the details of your project too. One example I've seen, for example, is that there have been indicators about tree canopy and shade, and that's led some clients, some communities that we've seen add in more greening to their projects than they otherwise were planning to, just because that was a need that they hadn't necessarily identified originally. So the indicators are extremely useful in terms of answering the narrative questions and even fine-tuning the scope of your project, but only the composite score qualifies you or disqualifies you as a disadvantaged community. And yes, I forgot to mention as well, this webinar has been approved for AICP CM credits. Somebody just wrote in.
Yeah, and just adding on to that, definitely use those indicators to your advantage. There's so much in there that you can add to your application, even if it doesn't contribute towards your DAC score. There's so much you can add to both the DAC section and like the needs section of the application, as Jonathan said.
Yeah, we've seen communities, not use HPI as their indicator.
Yes.
Use something else as their indicator, but still, or as their DAC qualifying metric, I meant to say, but still use the HPI for overall, answering the public health question, even if that's not what provides you the most DAC points. It does show you at a more granular level the specific needs of your community in ways that other indicators may not.
Yeah.
Okay. Last call for any questions, or we can wrap up about 10 minutes early. Okay, thank you both again, Beverly and Alika, for joining us. Thanks, Corey, for managing the chat, and thanks to you all for joining us. We've put all our contact information in as well. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with any follow-up questions to any of us about the ATP generally and Cycle 6 specifically, and best of luck to you in your applications. And another plug, please let your legislators know that we want to see that augmentation come in and be bountiful as well. Thanks to you all both very much, and all of you.
Thanks,
Thank
Jonathan.
you.